What's up, fight fans? This is Kurt DeVille with Counterpunch Boxing News, and I have some new news concerning Andy, the Destroyer Ruiz. Andy Ruiz's latest post, he posted to PBC Fox, and this is what he had to say. He said, "I think that would be an exciting fight, me and Luis Ortiz." Andy Ruiz Jr. Now, let me counterpunch. This kind of leaves a bad taste in my mouth because this was a fight that should have happened. I think that Andy Ruiz didn't need to lose a shitload of weight to be a credible fighter. I mean, after all, he fought all of his bouts overweight. So I don't think him losing and him going through a process of rejuvenating and reconstruction of his body would made a difference, him fighting Luis Ortiz, where Luis Ortiz is the older fighter. He's well into his 40s right now. He's 41, I believe, right? Or 42. I think he's 42 now. And last year, Andy Ruiz did not want to fight Luis Ortiz. And you guys can remember, Luis Ortiz was baffled. You know, he was really puzzled on why Andy Ruiz would turn down a fight with him, because that's the fight that could be made. That was the easier fight. They were on both Al Haymon fighters. So Al Haymon advised, quote unquote, both of those guys. So why couldn't that fight happen? Well, Andy responded that he needed more time. He needed time to train, and he wasn't ready. He wanted a tune-up fight. Well, we did see his tune-up fight, and we seen how that went down. The tune-up fight was a very, very challenging fight for Andy Ruiz. Even though he won off points and aggression, and he had to get it together. But he showed some ring rust. He showed ring rust. He showed that he wasn't the guy that we thought that he was going to be. But neither was Chris Arreola. Chris Arreola came in at an all-time low as far as weight. And it just makes you wonder, like, damn, he should have been doing that, you know, because he made a great account of himself, better than he did in years if I've seen Chris Arreola. So maybe that's just that experience coming in, knowing, hey, I shouldn't come in too wide, too heavy, because that makes me sluggish, that makes me slow. And unlike Andy Ruiz, my body acclimates differently and better to losing a certain amount of weight versus Andy. Andy has to adapt to this weight. As you can tell, Andy's physique looks like a guy that was really fat and lost a shitload of weight. And the more weight he loses, the more it's going to look like, ugh. Right? But back to Luis Ortiz. Luis Ortiz was present that night when Chris Arreola knocked him to the canvas and then buckled him in the second round, I believe, or the third round of their fight. And surprisingly, Andy Ruiz called out Luis Ortiz. Now, again, I like the aggression, but why now? I guess he figured, like, hey, I'm better, I feel better, you know, and I really didn't see that. I really didn't see any improvement in Andy Ruiz. I just saw him smaller. And because I seen him smaller, I think he was weaker. Because I think one thing that weakens people is when you lose muscle mass. And I think him losing that muscle mass along with weight or water retention and things of that nature and actual fat is strength, is muscle, and muscle, you know, gives you the power to move. And I think he took a lot out of that anchor, you know, of himself, the girth out of himself, and I think that made him weaker. Now, could he beat Luis Ortiz? It just really depends on what type of Luis Ortiz we're looking at. Because for one, Luis Ortiz, I think, is that guy that has been avoided, has been feared for a very long amount of time. Regardless of the age, people still tend to duck him like Andy Ruiz did as of last year. I mean, this was just last year, right? So about a year ago now, and he decided to not fight anyone for the whole remainder of the year. So he took a whole year off, and he had the opportunity to fight Luis Ortiz, but he wants to now. So the only thing that I can really come up with, the reason for that is because Andy Ruiz wanted to wait out time. Okay, that's a tactic, which you see a fighter aging, but he still has a couple good fights left. You want to make sure those couple fights are way depleted by the time you get him in there, so there won't be much of a threatening factor or a danger. You know, you'll just be fighting an older guy out of his prime and maybe past his time. Okay. And I think that's what they're banking on. They're banking on the fact that Ortiz, yeah, he might be skilled. He might be a good fighter and good ring IQ and great reflexes and counterpunching abilities. But at the end of the day, I think that Andy is betting on, him and Team Reynoso is betting on fighting Luis Ortiz so they can get a win on him being that much older, you know, and then getting a win, and then maybe taking on Deontay Wilder or perhaps somebody else, whoever wins out of Joshua or Usyk or Joshua Fury, because we don't really know if those guys are going to actually fight. So we have to stay tuned for that. But him saying, I think that would be an exciting fight. Andy Ruiz is now more confident now that he's lost a lot of weight and he's waited enough time for Luis Ortiz, as much as the rumors are about his age, get that much older. Okay, so he will be a less trouble to deal with. Because if you look at a fight like Luis Ortiz, he's a very dangerous fighter for anybody. But what makes him so dangerous is he counterpunches, and he's a southpaw. You know, and that straight left, you got to ask yourself, if that right from Chris Arreola can do that type of harm to Andy Ruiz, imagine what a straight left from someone like Luis Ortiz could do. What if he even hits harder? You know, and then that would be a great fight for both fighters. Me personally, I would go for the underdog. And the underdog in this is Luis Ortiz. Why? Not because he's the less skilled, because I think he's better skilled than Andy Ruiz. I think because he's older. And I think the father time will be for Andy Ruiz against Luis Ortiz. Because Luis Ortiz is a 42-year-old fighter that, even though he's only lost twice, just like Andy Ruiz, he still is a guy that is forever aging. Okay, so, you know, that ticking clock is running out. That hourglass is running out of sand on that back end. Okay, so Andy Ruiz saying that he wants to fight Luis Ortiz now, I can only chop that up as saying that he feels that Luis Ortiz is ready to go right now. But that's my counterpunch on that. You guys tell me what you think of Andy Ruiz calling out Luis Ortiz now. Of course, please subscribe. And you guys been Counterpunch. Peace.